Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nature's Happy Hour this week and Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation. I'm Chris Gambian. I'm the Chief Executive of the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales. Somebody once said that the definition of an honest politician is that once they are bought, they stay bought. And somebody else once said that two things that people should never see made are sausages and laws. But we're going to go deep into the psyches of some of our most eminent New South Wales politicians to find out what makes them really tick, and how we can put our case on the issues we care about in a way that will be heard and acted upon. In an era of Donald Trump, 24-hour news, social media, big dollar donations and tightly controlled political parties, is democracy irreversibly broken, or is it still possible for everyday citizens to have their say on matters that are really important to them? Jackie Mumford, you're a bit of a political wheeler dealer. Is grassroots democracy dead?
Oh, I don't think it's quite dead, but it might be on life support. But given I spend most of my time encouraging people to engage in grassroots democracy, I really hope we can revive it. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing some tips on influencing the pollies tonight.
Okay, well, before we meet our guest, hit us with those ground rules one more time.
Sure thing. So for any newcomers to Cocktails, welcome. It's great to have you here. The first rule of Cocktails is grab a cocktail, or in my case, grab a wine. The format this week is going to be a little different. So Chris and I will ask our guests some questions as we go. And then we'll ask some questions from you, the audience. So if you do have a question, please type it in the chat.
And we're recording the talk as always, so you can watch it later on Facebook, or as somebody rightly pointed out to me, not everybody's on Facebook, so you can also see it on YouTube.
That's right. And remember, you can follow the chat on Twitter using the hashtag Nature's Happy Hour. And you can follow at Nature New South Wales on Twitter, or you can follow Chris Gambian, because as always, he could do with some more friends.
Please. I'm looking very skinny on Twitter at the moment. Now, importantly, if you are enjoying yourself tonight, please, if you can spare it, send us a few dollars at nature.org.au, because, Jackie?
Koalas grow on trees, but money does not.
Okay, now to introduce our guests for tonight, thank you both for joining us. Jo Haylen is the member for Summerhill, which is a seat in the inner west of Sydney. Before that, she was the Mayor of Marrickville and a senior advisor to the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. Jo used to live, full disclosure, Jo used to live 2 doors down from me, and I'm pretty sure I still owe her some of her baking trays back. Welcome, Jo.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
And Alex Greenwich is the independent member for Sydney, which is a seat in a quiet little crossroads you've probably never heard of, slightly to the east of Newtown. You've probably never been there, but he was a pivotal leader in the marriage equality campaign, and more recently, he helped decriminalise abortion in New South Wales. Alex has been a great friend to the NCC since his election, and has recently been supporting our efforts to pause logging in unburnt state forests. Welcome, Alex.
Good evening. Thanks very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this chat, and hello, Jo.
G'day, Alex. Nice to see you.
Now, we were to be also joined by Mark Couray, and I think he will be jumping in, but he has had to send his apologies for at least the first few minutes, because as Assistant Speaker, he's currently actually presiding over the lower house. Is that right, Jo? Can you?
I can confirm that. I'm in Parliament, in New South Wales Parliament. I can see on the screen he is indeed in the chair. So hopefully he'll be able to escape soon.
Now, were Mark here, I would make the joke that he lives a few streets away from me. So I live in Oatley, which is his electorate. And last year we were both contesting elections, him state and me federal. And I was going to assume that he voted for me in the election. I'm not 100% sure on that. Maybe we can check a bit later.
Well, in the meantime, Jo and Alex, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. I'm hoping you can tell us about a time where you've been lobbied on an issue and that developed into something really constructive, where you went on to work closely with a group.
You want to go first, Alex?
Yeah, sure. But what comes to mind immediately for me is when I first got elected in 2012, a group of South Sea Islanders came and met with me in my electorate office. They educated me about something I didn't know about, which was Australia's slave trade. They wanted to see that our Parliament, the New South Wales Parliament, would finally acknowledge that and apologise for it. They took me through the entire history, got historians there, and were very clear in what their ask was, which was a motion to acknowledge and apologise the history that they had experienced. I was able to work really well with them, work with the government and opposition, and it was probably the first motion I actually did in the New South Wales Parliament, and it passed with unanimous support. I certainly thought about this the past fortnight, when the Prime Minister made the comment that slavery has never existed in Australia, then clarified to say, oh, it never existed in New South Wales. It truly did. And I'm really grateful to the South Sea Islander community, and particularly they had a really fierce advocate in Imelda Davies, who worked with me very closely. And we were able to get a really good result for them, a cathartic experience for them. And since then, I have continued to work with them. We were able to successfully lobby the ABS to have South Sea Islanders counted as a cohort in the last census, and that data will come out when the census data comes out next. So for me, that's an example of a community group which had previously largely been ignored. They came to me, put a really fierce case forward, put a very clear ask forward, and we were able to get them a result.
Just on that, Alex, what were can you just break that down for us a bit? Like, I imagine a lot of people come to you and put a sort of compelling case, but what was it about that one? Like, what did they do that was particularly cut through with you?
Well, when they met with me, it was obviously sort of elders of their community, activists of their community, and historians who were able to present with me a pretty clear case that it's pretty bad that this has been ignored for so long, and someone really needs to take action. Yet people come to me all the time, and I always like to see what I can do to help. And sometimes, that can be, directly lobbying a minister for a result, or putting in questions to get some information for people, making the submission on a DA or other item. And indeed, sometimes it can be doing a motion like this. But what was clear is that they knew that this was going to be a process where they wanted to work with me, to work with government and the opposition to get an outcome. And they were very clear on what their outcome was. And so that was extremely, extremely helpful. And, as a new member, as someone who was previously unaware of the slave trade that occurred in New South Wales and Australia, I felt it was incumbent on me to take action in this space. And to be honest, I felt sorry and I felt bad that I was not aware of this previously. And I made that clear when I spoke to the Parliament.
There's a question that somebody's asked just through the chat, which I don't normally just jump straight on them, but I thought it's a relevant one. Were these people particularly your constituents, or were they from sort of a variety of areas?
They were indeed. So Imelda, who was sort of their lead advocate, lives in Pyrmont in my electorate, and they met with me as a constituent, but also as a community group. As MPs, we have a lot of constraints on our time. They were also very shrewd. They got to me early, literally right as I was being elected, and I was really happy to help them out.
Great, thank you so much.
What about you, Joe?
Oh yeah, so I guess my example is a similar one, in that a group of constituents came to me for assistance, but it was about the potential closure of a childcare and before and after school hours care centre at a local public school. And that, I've got to say, they were the most efficient, well-organised community group I've ever met with. They were called Save Globe Wilkins. That was the name, or is the name, of the childcare centre. I've given away the ending here because they did indeed save that centre, but it took a long campaign. It was just before the last election that they were working through the issues, because as Alex will know, representing an electorate that is densely populated, there's so much pressure on space, and of course that is seen out in our schools. And this childcare centre existed within a school, and they needed those classrooms back because there were more and more kids, and so their existence was under threat. The thing that really compelled me about this community group was they were incredibly clear about what the issue was. They were incredibly clear about what they wanted to do. It wasn't that they were, demanding that they keep the same location, but they were clear about what was important to them, and that was high quality educators. They wanted to make sure that their children still got taught by those same well-qualified people, and that they were under the same child-focused learning program. It's a beautiful centre with a beautiful garden. They do lots of sustainability work. There's not many plastic toys. There's lots of craft and engagement with nature, and they loved it about that. And they said, look, we don't have to be in those same classrooms, but this is the ethic, this is what we want to hold on to. And we worked together with government, with the council, to try and find a solution. And as we, met each hurdle, they worked with me on each next step. So they were very clear what they were trying to achieve at each point, but along the way they had this incredible, they developed an incredible network within the community that included T-shirts and online activity, local media, state media. They even had an incredible fair day where they had hundreds of local families that came together, and they were very clever. While you're getting your kids' face painted, well, yes, you do have a couple of minutes to talk about the importance of early childhood education and sign a petition. And they really grew an incredible movement, and they were impossible to ignore as a result. And after the election, we had a fantastic celebration where the Minister for Education came and confirmed they were going to build a purpose-built facility on the site for the continuation of what is an award-winning early childhood learning centre.
Just maybe a bit of a follow-up question.
Was that they were, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, I was just thinking that both of you kind of have talked about these groups, and what I'm kind of hearing is the relationship that you've had with those constituents. So there seems to be kind of a sort of unified purpose, but also kind of a bit of a personal connection and a personal bond. Can you both just talk a bit more about that a little bit, Alex?
Well, I think one of the things which I appreciated from the approach that the example I gave, that the South Sea Islanders was, is they came there to really educate me. They had also worked really closely with my electorate office staff as well. And yes, we developed a strong relationship over time. And I think sort of Joe's example of a well laid out campaign with clear asks, with different phases, with creative strategies, and knowing that it's not going to be just up to the MP to run the entire campaign, but that you are going to be supporting and providing another voice to an existing organised campaign is what is really helpful. And I think the other key thing is in dealing with members of Parliament is never forget our staff. Yes, you see us out there. You might see us in the media. You see us in Parliament, but so much of the work is done by our staff. So if you're trying to get through to an MP, but they say, "Oh no, you can talk to my staff member," that's not a fob off. In many cases, and in cases of my office, you're often talking to someone far more intelligent than I am, who's been around the Parliament and processes a long time. And I know that Joe has an amazing team of staff as well. So never forget the staff, and definitely work with them.
Joe, your thoughts on just the relationships and...
Yeah, I definitely echo Alex's view about working with staff, and particularly, if you're trying to engage an MP, don't see it as a fob off, but also don't wait around for the prospect of a face-to-face meeting. If your matter's urgent and you can talk to a member of staff, but often that's much more efficient and much better for your ambitions. But I think what was so effective in terms of this group was that they were not only well organised, they were clear about what their asks were, but they were also wanted to work strategically with me to say, well, if we don't get this answer, what are the other options that we can take? And are we better to perhaps ask a series of questions, or perhaps ask for a face-to-face meeting before, writing a fairly, aggressive email or a letter, for example. They did escalate their campaign where, while they tried a variety of different approaches, when they did actually turn up to a conference where the minister was speaking and get to ask a question directly of her, I think, you've got to be willing to employ those different tactics, but we worked together strategically to decide when you might utilise those different tools.
Yeah, great. What would you say some of the common misconceptions are about talking to MPs or getting your MP to pay attention to you?
Well, I might talk in my, I've kind of had a broad experience from, being on a loud hailer outside parliaments, joining protests, being protested against, lobbying MPs, being inside and outside parliament. And the thing that strikes me often is, and what I have really learned over time, is the importance to be nice to people. Remember that members of parliament are human beings. They have their own stresses, their own personal stuff going on in many cases, in some cases. They have a variety of priorities which they're trying to juggle. And if you're going to be screaming in their face, if you are going to be telling them off in a meeting, just sort of think how you would feel if someone did that to you. I've learned in all the different strategies that I've employed from an activist advocate background, a marriage equality campaigner, now a member of parliament. The thing that gets me the furthest is actually to be nice to people. So I think that is sometimes a tough message when you are so impassioned about an issue. But when you are really impassioned about an issue, sometimes that prevents you from thinking clearly and strategically. And it's often, I often always go back to first principles, which is treat the person I'm talking to as a human being.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical starting point, because I'm always much more willing to give people time and want to assist them if they're willing to engage, politely, constructively. But the other thing I'd add was, I guess, reiterate that if you get an opportunity to talk to our staff, that's definitely a great starting point. And often you can get a lot of your issues progressed and or resolved by just dealing with our officers directly. The other thing I think is to have that initial engagement and explain the issue clearly and succinctly. As Alex said, we often don't have a lot of time, so you want to assume little knowledge, but outline the issue briefly and succinctly, and then be very clear about what your ask is and perhaps what some of the other things you're thinking about as other options, and ask, what do you think might be the most effective way to progress my issue, to get the change I need, to get the meeting that I want to happen. So I think, to again acknowledge, or to put yourself in the staff member's position or our position, to go, well, how would I want to deal with someone, and how would I explain this to someone who perhaps doesn't actually have much understanding or hasn't had much engagement with that issue. The only other thing I would flag to is it's definitely not a good idea to start sending a whole lot of emails and perhaps aggressively adding to those emails. I think, you think the people that are dealing with, our inboxes are our staff, and they're much more likely to respond to an email and try and prioritise an email that is clear, succinct, and, as Alex said, polite.
Yeah, that's great. One of the questions that
I was just going to say a tip that I learned from Kathy McGowan, the federal independent member for Indi, when I was actually meeting her around the marriage equality postal survey to get her support for a protection in that. She started the meeting with, let's start this with you telling me the results you want by the end of this meeting. And it put me on the spot, but it's something I employ now. And a question I ask, and you would be surprised the amount of people who don't know how to answer that question. So make sure you clearly know what action you actually want the MP or the staff member you're meeting with to take.
It's the elevator pitch, isn't it? Can you
Absolutely.
tell me in 7.5 seconds what you're about?
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. And one of the questions that has come up a little bit. Oh, sorry, Chris.
I'm going to start using that technique in the NCC, I think.
Yeah, a question that's come up a few times there is, how do we take an issue up with a politician who might not be sympathetic or on board with our cause? And I think there's some really practical steps there that people can take. One question I have is that often when we meet with an MP, they tell us, I'll go and speak to the minister, or I'll go and speak to the shadow minister about that. Does that really happen? Like, how seriously do you take an issue once it's been raised? And would it help if it's getting media coverage or other exposure?
Look, I'm not going to give a commitment to anyone, and particularly a constituent, unless I can, deliver on it. I'm always been of the adage of, under promise, over deliver. So, I'm not going to promise to go and see a minister if I don't have a working relationship with them, or don't think that's going to be in the best interest of progressing the cause that the constituent or local community group is after. I might suggest that a better way or a different approach, maybe go direct to the Premier, or perhaps even that there are elements of a federal issue, or other things we could progress together. So from my point of view, I'm not going to promise something I'm not going to do.
Yeah. And what about you as an independent, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm exactly the same. And rest assured, members of Parliament, whether, opposition, crossbench or government members, are constantly talking, whether it's in the hallways, walking down to divisions, whether it is organising meetings with members, whether it's calling MPs directly. We are always talking to people and honouring those commitments we make. Now, we have to differentiate that from being able to get the result that the person wants. Often if we talk to a minister about an issue, it's going to take 2 or 3 times before we can get an actual outcome. And it can be that we need to talk to their, to their staff to get an outcome. So we definitely do it. But, just like, when my husband might ask me to, make sure I do the dishes after dinner, I might not do it until later on. Sometimes things do take time, and sometimes you've got other stuff to do in between. But I see Joe all the time talking to MPs, ministers, and shadow ministers, and I'm exactly the same.
Great, thank you. Now, I wanted to just run through a little list of and I can see through the chat that people are kind of asking these. So just some of the things that people try to get MPs to sort of pay attention to an issue and to raise the profile of an issue with MPs. And so I'm going to run through them. I just want you to either give them a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a thumbs maybe. All right, you ready? Petitions. Everybody says thumbs up.
My caveat would be, I guess, I am much more compelled to jump to a more urgent action than deprioritise if it is a handwritten petition that I can table in Parliament on people's behalf, or if they are locals that have come to me with that petition. So not at all dissuading people from signing online petitions. They definitely have their place, but handwritten petitions that can be tabled in the Parliament, double thumbs up for them.
Okay, Alex, any reflections on petitions?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have petition debates in our Parliament. So particularly if you can get up to 10,000, you can have a debate of your issue in Parliament, and that does definitely bring the focus of the building to the issue. Petitions are certainly a useful tool.
Okay, email campaigns where you get 1,000 of the same email. Joe says down.
This is a thumbs down on behalf of my staff.
I think it's I don't know if Joe has the same problem, but it's a unique thing I get being the member for Sydney. Everybody thinks they live in Sydney, and so there's a lot of email campaigns that target my office. And then when we filter through and see the actual people who are constituents, it's a very small number. I would also say form emails. A member of Parliament does not treat those the same as an email they have written themselves to you about an issue and directly to your office. If you're part of some kind of form program, there is an additional filter that an MP will put through that and taking it seriously.
Phone calls to the office. Good one, Alex.
I think as long as you have a clear ask and you are nice to our staff about it. I have had times on some of the issues that I've dealt with where I have actually had to put my phone, my electorate office and Parliament office phone on answer message for weeks at a time because of harassment that is received towards my staff. So those have been some pretty intense campaigns. But as long as you're nice, as long as you're a constituent, and as long as you've got a clear ask, then sure.
I guess one of the themes I'm hearing here is,
Be nice.
Nice. Treat people like people, and they'll treat you like a person. And if you don't treat them like a person, they're not going to treat you like a person.
I think that's a very reasonable assumption. But I think people would be surprised how I guess people believe that they could say things that perhaps they wouldn't even say to some random in the street, that they could say to a political office, and indeed, to our staff, Alex, as you say. It's I guess it's it's like unfortunately like a verbal version of some of those Facebook comments that you think, is someone really writing that down? But that's really disappointing. But I don't want to discourage people from calling MPs, because I've got to say I often would recommend that to people that want to take their issue directly to a minister or to a premier as well. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite here and say don't call my office, because I often say to other people, being in the opposition, you should call the government.
Yeah. And we're getting some love on in the comments on Facebook for your staff, saying thanks for all the wonderful work that your staff do.
Sure, it's not my staff's mum or anything. No, my staff are brilliant. I'm incredibly lucky.
What about things like letters to the editor of the local paper, or even the Herald or the Telly or that?
Absolutely.
If there were any local papers, that's that's a challenge now.
Yeah, right. What about, see, there's a joke here, and now I've completely lost the rhythm of it, but that's all right. Somebody asked on the question on the chat line, what about things like protests out the front of the office?
I normally, if they're, as Alex would say, well behaved, I often invite them in. So, like particularly, I'll invite like the climate strikers, for example, to come via my office so we can have a conversation about how we can work together to get real action on climate change. I'm not against people using any means they can if they want to take a message to government.
Yeah, Alex.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. Protest is an important part of political expression. I have had people protest outside my office. It's not an issue that I'm going to change my mind about. But often if it is a group, a local group, a local campaign, again with Joe, I will invite them in and have a chat. I did get, during the marriage equality campaign, I did get a tip from Christina Keneally, and when we were talking about doing a big rally in front of the ALP National Conference, I'm sure Joe remembers that one. This is back in maybe 2010, 2008, something like that. Christina said, look, unless you're going to get 10,000 or more people, it's not worth it. So she gave us the bar, and we were able to achieve that.
Exceeded.
Exceeded, yeah.
We got some good questions on the chat line there, Jackie.
A lot of questions coming in about tactics and the most effective ways of getting through. What about a nice handwritten letter?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I've got a number of beautiful handwritten letters pinned to notice boards in my office, and I think that's very effective. Just like, as Alex pointed out, often the sort of form emails get filtered into a large folder that then our staff have to work out who's a local, whereas a personal, email. I always say if I get, even half a dozen personal emails from local residents about a particular issue, it grabs my attention. Absolutely. And I will often ring them back and just say, look, why don't we, I've heard from a number of your neighbours about the same issue. Let's have a chat.
Yeah. And maybe one final question that's come in here. Are you representative of all MPs, or are you just extra nice switched on MPs?
Alex is extra nice.
So is Joe.
Job.
Joe is really nice, and actually Mark Curray, who I know was going to join us but is stuck in the chair, is also a really decent guy. And actually, what I have found with most members of the New South Wales Parliament is they are all good people, and you sometimes just need to spend a bit of time to find what a common interest is, or actually what motivates them. And it may be different to what motivates you, but you can sometimes get a result once you spend a bit of time understanding what a person is passionate about. And a really hot tip to work that out is read an MP's inaugural speech.
Great advice.
Come on.
Although you guys, like, this is cocktails controversy and conservation. I'm not sure I care for this kind of, mutual affection.
We have to be at least 5 cocktails down before Alex will get out his hit list.
For the sort of the late night edition of. All right, now before we go, and it's a shame Mark hasn't been able to join us tonight, but as I said, he does send his apologies. Having the Parliament has to come first. That's fair enough. But we'll try to get him on another time to have a chat about some things. At the end of these sessions, we always like to play a little game, and it's a different game each week. And this week we're playing Who Would You Rather? New South Wales Politics Edition. So,
Oh, wow.
Joe Haylen, I've heard.
Okay, I'm ready.
I've heard you like a drink. Who would you rather have a drink with, Bob Carr or Barry O'Farrell?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'd rather go for a bushwalk with Bob Carr because, one, he loves doing that, and one of our state's creator of great national parks that we all enjoy. But also, I don't think he likes an alcoholic drink. And when I think drinks, I'm thinking cocktails or a glass of red wine. So I think Barry O'Farrell would probably have the better red wine. He'd have a bottle of Grange. So I'd go with Barry.
The beauty of bushwalk with Bob Carr is that you'll also get a history of the Civil War while you
or American politics or all his achievements in New South Wales, all of which are very interesting.
Now, Mark's not here, so we can speculate on what his answer would be, all right? So
this would be the most fun of the game.
Mark's question was going to be, who do you reckon he would rather go on a 3-day hike with, John Barilaro or Mark Latham?
In the Kosciuszko?
But none of them are shooters, so...
Okay, yeah.
Maybe go horse riding with Barra, and I don't know what Mark Latham does in his spare time, just be randomly racist or something. Now, Alex Greenwich, you're an independent. Who would you rather form a minority government with, Joe Haylen?
Yes.
Yes, of course, Joe.
We've done things together before.
Exactly, and during the campaign and the legislative process to decriminalise abortion, there were a group of us who across the Parliament were working really well together. And I often thought as I could say, this would be a good group of people to be in government together because we were able to really work well and across party lines to get a result in a really tough time.
It's a pretty special thing to be a part of, Alex, absolutely.
Indeed.
Well done to you both. Now, there's heaps of issues that NCC and all of our members are going to hit you both up about over the next little period. So keep doing what you're doing. And now that you've given us all the secrets, expect to be lobbied very hardly, but very politely.
That's right, with polite handwritten letters.
Yeah. Very
handwriting. The handwriting has to be legible, though. That's the otherwise type it out.
Well, thanks so much to you both for joining us. We've got another cocktails coming up in 2 weeks' time. In 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the opportunities that the technology around renewables offers the state right now. And we're going to be joined by Simon Holmes-a-Court and a couple of other really eminent panelists. So tune in for that in 2 weeks' time. Remember that all of this can be viewed as a recording on our Facebook page and our YouTube channels. And Jackie, one more plug.
Yes, make sure you head along and donate at nature.org.au.
It's 2 weeks till the end of the financial year, so it's a great time to chip in if at all you can. We know times are tough, but every dollar really does make a huge difference. Thanks so much, everybody, and good night.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Bye-bye.